Each life we incarnate into has a divine purpose. For the majority of people on this planet, their purpose has eluded them. We have become so distracted with the struggle to survive that we have forgotten what we are here to do. In alignment with the sacred laws of nature, the ultimate purpose of all existence is to create and evolve. We certainly do not incarnate into life with the intention to destroy. And yet, we have come to live in a very destructive world. As a result, there are many out there who feel lost or adrift, whilst knowing deep down inside that something is very wrong with their reality. Many people wish they could do something of value, anything that is purposeful, instead of having to submit to a system of slavery in order to survive. It is important never to let go of that feeling. That is your soul crying out to you, telling you that your life has value and that you do indeed have a purpose. The most important thing you can do in life is to recognize your purpose, and often that requires a lot of soul searching. Life indeed dishes out some pretty tough challenges, which will either move you closer towards your purpose path, or will give you great training for when you finally realize what it is that you came here to do. But more often than not, the very clues about your life's purpose are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of our existence. But we are so easily distracted by irrelevant details that don't really matter, that often we miss the very obvious right in front of us. It is because of our willful ignorance of anything that does not fit our preconceived ideas that the truth about the nature of our reality is so readily hidden in plain sight. This is a very deep and personal journey, which has come to be expressed in many aspects throughout my life. This is not just an attempt to retell a bunch of research and pass it off as my own, for I am very grateful and openly acknowledge all the many wonderful people that I have been given the opportunity to work with and to learn from in order to get to the point where I've come to know what I now know. This is a journey I was always destined to go on, and likewise, how I have come to know this information forms as much a part of the story as the information itself.
You're live.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Melvi, and this is Conscious Consumer Network coming to you live from our headquarters here, somewhere undisclosed, I should say, in the Netherlands. If you've tuned in tonight, you've obviously tuned in for the bumper edition of Dragonology, so thank you very much for being with us. We've had a lot of technical issues over the last few weeks, so we've not been able to get a clean and proper recording of Dragonology Season 2, Episode 9. So we're going to be doing, let's just say, a slightly revised Episode 9 with a few additions to it. And I'll be going on straight afterwards to continue with Episode 10. So if you are not settled in, please do get your butts nice and warm. Get some tea, coffee, or a glass of wine. And we're going to have a rather interesting evening. So tonight we continue with Episode 9. And this does continue on the track that we've been on for some weeks now of ritual and sacrifice. And there are various themes which accompany ritual and sacrifice, which just keep coming up again and again and again, and you cannot escape them. So just so that we know that we've touched on those themes, so you guys know them and they're conscientized in your mind, so that when you see them again, you go, yeah, there's that theme again. These themes keep coming up, so it's very important for you guys to get these sort of down immediately. Okay. So one of the things that's obviously, when it comes to sacrifice, one of the most common themes is, of course, the sacrificing of virgins or the innocent, sacrificing of children, and that sort of thing. Of course, we've dealt a lot with wheat, the harvest season, immolation, mola sala, that kind of thing, which, of course, mola sala is the salt and the covenant of salt. We've covered that off quite a lot. War, of course, nothing but sacrifice. That is what war is. And sometimes a burnt offering is known as a holocaust. And of course, the Second World War was known as a holocaust as well. It's no accident because it was, in fact, a sacrifice. And immolation is another word for holocaust, which is burnt offering. This is where you get the root of the word mola sala from, which is where you get wheat and salt from. Then one of the most common things that comes up again and again and again, and we're going to touch on this tonight, and it's a theme that becomes very important as we continue through the series, and that is the theme of eating, ritual feasting, and the very specific act of cannibalism, which of course is eating other human beings. And then, of course, the ritual sacrifice of the firstborn or the first fruits. We've covered that off quite a bit as well. And then the theme of concealment or substitution, like, for example, substituting a scapegoat or a scape lamb, much like Jesus and Isaac were. We've covered off the Grim Reaper quite a bit, sort of the Reaper icons, which the feminine version of that being Santa Muerte, a Saint Death, and the other version, of course, the Celtic version, and the Greek version of that being the ferryman. Angels and devils, again, sort of a very brushstroke wide indication of one of the most prevalent themes being the ubiquitous duality, which is inextricably and erroneously associated with dragons. And of course, ritual wouldn't be ritual unless it was attuned to the solar cycles, which of course brings you to the seasonal things of harvest and spring, death and rebirth, and all of that ties into the aspect of time. Now, time is the big theme for tonight. We're going to be covering off time quite a bit because it's important to understand the symbolic allegory behind time, which is a lot deeper than just knowing where you are at one specific time. Okay, so let's define a ritual. That which is done at a specific place, for a specific purpose, at a specific time. Okay? That is all you need to understand when it comes to defining what a ritual is. If you can apply that to anything, that thing is then a ritual. So one of the key themes in relation to sacrifice and ritual, of course, is the aspect of time. And why this is so important is because time is actually measured or is directly correspondent with the movements of the sun. Okay, time has in fact been mapped out according to the sun, and a very good sort of tangible explanation or example of this are sundials. I'm sure you've all seen these, which are clocks that tell the time in accordance with the sun. You need quite a bit of skill to read one of these, but it's not terribly difficult. Okay, so sun god symbolism. The anthropomorphized sun god is an expression of sun god symbolism. Okay, that an anthropomorphized sun is basically any sun depiction with a face on it. So it's been given sort of human-like or people or person or personificational qualities. And this particular symbol is a multi-layered symbolic construct, which is ultimately representative of the dragon. Please do go back and watch all our previous Dragonology episodes, and you'll see how the sun actually is a multi-layered symbolic allegory representing dragon. Time symbolism. Okay. Now, just so that we got the basics down. This is pretty common knowledge to everybody. What's interesting to notice here are the number signatures, because obviously the numerology is always important when it comes to these kind of things. So time is divided into cycles. We start with the smallest measurement of time being 60 seconds, which there are 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, and 12 months per year. We'll be covering off all of these over the course of this episode and episode 10. But for now, let's have a look at this. The clock has obviously got 12 representations here. It does the 24 cycle twice in one 24-hour period and divides that up over 12, which is why there's only 12 representations here. Then you've got the second hand, which is this long, thin one, which goes 60 times around the clock. Then the minute hand and the hour hand, and of course, where they all join in the middle, where it's all operated from. This is obviously the key point of this clock. Not necessarily where it's pointing to, because it wouldn't matter where it's pointing to if none of this operated. Now, this is a bigger cycle of time. Much like this depicts a cycle of time, so does this. The cross of the zodiac is one of the oldest conceptual objects known to man, and it marks the sun's journey across the sky through the course of the year. And much like this clock, it's got some similar, if not identical, symbolic markers. Let me point these out to you. First off, what's interesting to note here is there's obviously 12 months per year. This is, as it says, marks the sun's journey across the sky through the course of the year. And in the year, there's 12 months. 12 months in a year. There's 4 seasons in a year. Okay, spring, autumn, summer, and winter. It's 4 seasons. And of course, there's 3 zodiac signs per season. Okay, for example, you got Gemini, Libra, Aries, Cancer, all of these, 3 of them in each season. And of course, there would be a total of 12 zodiac signs represented on the traditional Western Hermetic cross of the zodiac. What is interesting to notice, however, is that this solar representation, okay, this over here, which is also much like this, a solar representation, this is a smaller cycle of time that fits within this cycle of time, okay. This solar representation is actually a depiction of a sun god. Okay, the cross that goes through the middle of the Hermetic cross of the zodiac, with the sun section being in the middle, is actually representative of the Christian cross. That is what the Christian cross is. All the Christian cross is this over here, which is the solstice and equinox lines, which are marked out on the Western Hermetic cross of the zodiac. And Jesus, as represented in the Christian religion, is an allegory, okay? And his allegory is nothing more than an astrotheological hybrid of a sun god or solar messiah. And the sun gods are prevalent. It doesn't matter which religion you look at, you'll find one, a primordial god that's usually associated with the sun. And there were sun goddesses as well. It's not just a patriarchal symbol. Here we go, are some examples of Jesus as a sun god, because in these pictures over here, this one over here and this one over here, the central icon being Jesus, the sun, is surrounded by zodiac symbols. Okay, notice over here, this zodiac symbols, that would be Jesus in the middle with a cross, here with a cross over here. And you've got Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus with the zodiac around him. And this particular is a Byzantine depiction. In fact, this is a mosaic that comes out of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, in Turkey. I've actually seen this particular one. And what you've got over here, it's the cross, much like this cross here, behind the head of Jesus. Okay? And of course, the Pope, both the former and the present Pope, carry these lovely swords, whatever you call them, with these sun symbols on them, clearly depicting the cross over there with the rays of the sun coming out. Very interesting. It's very obvious to anybody with some basic skills of deduction that Jesus is in fact a sun god, a representation of a sun. Now, what's interesting to notice is these 2 particular cycles of time, this one obviously fitting within this one, are identically represented. Okay, as I said, this has 12 representations. All right, you've got 12 here as well. You've got the line bisecting horizontally and vertically. Same over here. And it divides it up into 4 pieces, and each of the 4 pieces fits 3 segments. Same here, 4 pieces with 3 segments in them. So you've got that same division, the 12, the 4, and the 3, with the central point in the middle, okay, being the sun or Jesus or whatever you want that to represent. But that central point is very, very important. These are, in fact, the clock and the cross of the Hermetic zodiac are 2 identical symbols. Okay, the templates are identical. You overlay them and they are absolutely identical symbols. What do they represent? Well, before we go on to that, let's have a look at this. The point in the center of the circle, as I already mentioned, very important. In the most rudimentary allegory, the point in the center of the circle is symbolic of the sun / dragon. Okay, as we've already said, the sun is a multi-layered symbolic masking of the dragon. But when you go and look at Madame Blavatsky's work, and believe me, Madame Blavatsky knew absolutely everything. She's very seldom wrong about anything. One of the key things she says about this symbol is that it's the first differentiation in the periodical manifestation of the ever-eternal nature, sexless and infinite. Okay, and that's from page 4 of book 1 of the Secret Doctrines. Again, this 3, 4, 12 with the central point allegory comes up in this picture. For those who have watched previous Dragonologies, this won't be old to you, but I'm going to take this through for those of you who may be new to this information. Okay, so a total of 12 disciples. Look, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, with Jesus the central point. Okay? Now, what's interesting to notice is all of these disciples are grouped. Here's 3 disciples. Here's another group over here of 3, and here's another group of 3. So you've got the 4 groups of 3, okay, which is not unlike this, okay? You've got the 4 segments with 3 zodiac in them. Now, what's also interesting to notice, as I said, the central point being that over here, which would represent Jesus, okay? This central point, if you actually look at it, anywhere in this picture, you follow the lines down, okay? They always end up at Jesus's head. From any point, I beg your pardon, any point in this picture, follow all the lines and where they lead, that all come to his head. Absolutely everything in this picture is pointing, even the lines in the ceilings, okay? If you bring them down, it comes straight towards Jesus's head, because that is the central point of this picture, much like that is the central point of the symbol. It's deliberately done this way. Leonardo da Vinci knew exactly what he was doing, okay? He was, in this picture, very cleverly encoding the allegory of the 12, 3, and 4, with the central point being the entire depiction of the sun symbolism, which the cross of the zodiac is. It's a depiction of the sun. It depicts the sun's movements through the course of the year. What is a clock? It measures time. How does it measure it? By the movements of the sun. So it all comes back to the sun. And of course, Jesus was the Son of God. So here's another depiction of this. The solar cycles depicted. And of course, this evidenced very much the fact that Da Vinci was, in fact, a mystery school initiate. For those who have seen the Da Vinci Code, you'll be very well aware of this fact. He was, in fact, a member of the Priory of Sion. And as you can see over here, you've got the various signs representing the zodiac over here, attributed to each one of the various disciples, and the seasons. So spring representing these 3, summer representing these 3, autumn representing these 3 disciples, and winter representing these 3. So you've got the 4 seasons, 3 disciples in each season, and the sun in the middle. Okay, where do clocks turn up? This is a rather, it's an important thing to grasp, because they've kind of hidden the symbols. Now that you know what a clock represents, okay, because you can see it by the markers, it's very interesting to notice that this object turns up everywhere, okay? Clocks are commonly found on church steeples. And as we've already said, there are multi-layered symbolic expression masking the sun and the dragon. They're one of the most common everyday items. Most people look at a clock more times than they care to admit every single day. The concept of a clock, all right, worn on the wrist, is known as a watch. What's interesting is the word watch is indicative of watches. Now, we've come across this before. Who are the watchers? Those known as the watchers are usually a reference to the biblical angels. Now, check out Daniel chapter 4, verses 13, 17, 23, where they mention the watchers. And what's interesting to notice is that if you actually look for pictures on the seraphim and the angels and the watchers, one of the things you come up quite a lot with are these six-winged angels, hexagon angels, often very commonly depicted with eyes in them. Okay, numerous eyes in the wings. And this is very common. It comes up in numerous depictions. Here's a mosaic in a church with a hexagon angel, six-winged angel, with the eyes all in the wings. Here we go, more. With the eyes in the wings over here. So the watchers, because they're watching. What else would the eyes be doing? And of course, the all-seeing eye, one of the most common symbolic expressions to those who have been investigating this kind of information for some time. The symbol, of course, turns up on the back of the $1 bill and in most Roman Catholic churches. So it's said that the all-seeing eye is actually a representation of the Eye of Horus, because commonly found under, this is IHS, representing Isis, Horus, and Seth. And this is the Eye of Horus, the Egyptian Eye of Horus. Interesting to note, on this particular depiction of it, you have the rearing cobra, known as the uraeus, and this is normally a depiction of royalty or sacred bloodline. What's interesting to notice, why Horus is important, is the word hours is derived from the Egyptian sun god Horus. No jokes. All you do is you take the U and move it between the R and the S, and you've got Horus. Now, Horus is commonly depicted as a peregrine falcon, and we've covered this off a lot in Dragonology previously. Very important to get that, not just any bird, a peregrine falcon. Both the word pere and grin, separately, these two words individually, both on their own, root back into serpentine etymology. So you've got two dragon root words in the word peregrine. And of course, the peregrine falcon is known as the hunter. It's one of the fastest animals on the planet. And you can always tell the peregrine falcon by the fact that it's got very distinctive black marking around the eye, which hooks back like this. So very interesting to notice already is this theme of the bird coming in at this point, which comes up again and again and again. The interrelationship between the dragon and the bird is so common, it just cannot be missed. You know, even to the whole wings allegory we've already dealt with over here, winged beings. Okay, what's the other creature that has wings? Birds. So you cannot separate this whole bird and dragon symbolism. They kind of do link together. Now, what's interesting to notice about, obviously we said the word hours comes from the word Horus. Why? Because Horus was a sun god, okay? And further to this allegory is the Dutch word for the timepiece that we wear on our wrist, which we call a watch, is known as a horlogie, okay? Now, horlogie is taken from the word Horus. That's where the name comes from. The symbolism of the feather, okay, represents bird symbolism. So the feather symbolism comes up quite a lot, and I'll show you an indication of where we've got feather symbolism. That is over here. These feathers come up quite a lot on these sort of pharaohs' crowns, very commonly depicted. So you do get a lot of feather symbolism in the Egyptian religion. We've covered off Mart in previous Dragonologies, uses the feather to weigh your heart for judgment. And obviously if your heart's heavier than the feather, it's not a good thing. But this is inextricably symbolically linked to dragons is feather symbolism, which of course represents bird symbolism. And bird symbolism is thus further symbolic of the dragon. What is also important to notice about the word feather is it is etymologically cognizant with father. Okay, now there's only one letter missing to get father. And this is important because this is where we go next. We're dealing with time, and now we go on to father, bringing us father time. Father time is an anthropomorphized depiction of time, usually depicted as an elderly bearded man carrying a scythe and hourglass. Okay, here's the hourglass, here's his scythe, not unlike the Grim Reaper that we've dealt with before. Okay, the Grim Reaper is very much an archetype of the father time figure, and also commonly depicted with his hourglass and a scythe, but the Grim Reaper is more skeletal looking as opposed to an old bearded man. That's the big difference in the physical locale. Kronos is the Greek god who is also depicted very much the same way with, check, now we've got the wings coming in, as we've already talked about feathers and wings. We've got over here the hourglass and, of course, the sky. In Greek mythology, Kronos is described as serpentine shape. That's from Wikipedia. It actually says that in Wikipedia. And although he doesn't look like this in this particular carving, it actually says in Wikipedia that the god Kronos is described as being serpentine shaped. Very interesting. All right, so father time. One of the most interesting depictions for me that I've come across when dealing with this whole allegory of father time is his depiction of being with the weeping virgin. And this is a very interesting story because there's a lot playing out here symbolically in this depiction. So let me take you through it. What is actually going on here is father time is cutting the hair of the virgin. That's what this is all about. He's supposed to be using his scythe to cut the virgin's hair. You can see he's holding onto the virgin's hair here. There's more of him holding the virgin's hair. Now, what is the virgin doing? The virgin holds in her hand an olive branch, which she's placing onto the altar. This is a broken altar. You can see it laying down here. It's actually a column. Now, what do you do on an altar? You sacrifice. What is a column representative of? Column is representative of a serpent. The word column is actually another word for dragon or serpent. We've covered that off previously in Dragonology as well. So there's a lot of allegory going on in this particular depiction. So it's no wonder that this depiction turns up very commonly in Freemasonic imagery. Of course, you've got the eye, which turns up in most occult imagery and artworks. And we'll go off to cover the G a bit later. But here you've got the square and compass of masonry. This is a Masonic artwork. And over here, you've got the Virgin with the olive branch, placing it on the altar. There's the broken column. Here's the time, the hourglass of Father Time, and here's Father Time holding onto the Virgin's hair. So you can see this whole depiction going on here. Why? Because this is, for me, one of the most well-hidden symbolic allegories you can come across. And it is very much depicting sacrifice, okay? Doesn't look like that in this picture. All nice and peaceful and good and well, all pretty, but that's what this depicts. What is this all about? It's about sacrifice. Let's explain. The cutting of the hair. The symbolic significance of the cutting of the hair, okay, represents the sacrifice of the firstborn. So here you've got Father Time again, cutting the Virgin's hair, the Virgin putting the olive branch on the altar, and you've got the broken altar. Okay, so what is this cutting of the hair all about? Right, the hidden votive is encoded into the etymological similarity between hair and heir. All right, heir as in like your child, your firstborn. This is what this is all about. All right, the cutting of the hair is actually an allegory of heir. Right, a cutting of the heir, a sacrificing of the firstborn. So that is what's going on in this particular depiction. It's completely and purely symbolically allegorical of the sacrificing of the firstborn. And there's more going on here because the olive branch now needs to be dealt with. Okay, so what is the olive branch all about? The olive branch is usually seen as a symbol of peace. But what's interesting to notice is the Arabic word for olive branch is Satan, okay? And is etymologically cognizant with Satan. No jokes. So, symbol of peace, really. The symbolic expression of the dove carrying an olive branch is supposed to be a representation of peace, but it's not. We've covered off what the dove symbol means in previous Dragonologies, and of course, this is the point in which we tie into the bird symbolism and allegory, which comes up again and again. So what is it all about? The dove carrying the olive branch, which is supposed to represent peace. Well, the Latin word dove, Latin word for dove is columba, and the Latin word for serpent is colubra. Now, if you take the L and the U out of colubra, you've got cobra, which, as you know, is a serpent word, a dragon word. Now, colubra and columba and colubra, so the word for dove and the word for serpent in Latin, are etymologically cognizant with each other. And this is where the interrelationship between bird and serpent is very clear and very common, is in the Latin allegory. Now, the word peace is also rooted in dragon etymology, because peace comes from, it's rooted in the very common dragon root triad, pala, para, pio. If you've watched previous Dragonology, you'll have gone through this dragon root triad with me. Pala, para, pio comes up again and again and again. And peace in this particular allegory would come from any one of these three. And an example of words that come from the pala, para, pio rooted of group words would be pear, peer as in to look, and pear as in the fruit, all of which we've dealt with in previous Dragonologies. Okay, now, let's have a look at this little hideous monstrosity. Go past this thing every now and then. The Vredepaleis, or the Peace Palace, which is in The Hague. Well, it's a bit of a joke, really. Even to the locals, they know it as the War Palace. It's not a peace palace. There hasn't been peace on our planet for thousands of years. There's a war fighting and being fought or being waged somewhere. So what's the point of having a peace palace when there is none? And when all the courts and various institutions that surround it are ineffective and completely redundant. The only thing this is nothing more than a very expensive public relations exercise. There is no peace. Even the concept of peace, right down to the etymology, is a complete joke. It actually is more an allegory of war. Now, Saturn and sacrifice. We spoke already about, just going back a little bit to this olive branch. Satan is etymologically cognizant with Satan, and Satan comes from Saturn. So now we're going to get onto the Saturn part of this. Saturn and sacrifice, two things that are inextricably linked, okay? An archetype which is similar to the Father Time guy kind of allegory symbolism is that of Saturn. And Saturn is actually, I think, more honestly represented than Father Time, because in some of the depictions of Saturn, you will actually see, for example, the sky killing the baby rather than just, cutting off the hair of the Virgin, which is more symbolically allegorical. This is more, okay, yeah, no, we're going to hack this baby apart and it's going to be a sacrifice. You can see it here. So much like Father Time would be cutting the baby, the firstborn, represented by the cutting of the Virgin's hair, this is what you kind of get with Saturn. It's a bit more sort of direct, not so allegorical. But Saturn is often depicted in a sacrificial stance or eating children. Got a few of those in here. Here's another depiction of Saturn, which is quite common, and that is Saturn cutting Cupid's wings. And not unlike Father Time cutting the Virgin's hair, which represents the sacrifice of the firstborn, so too does the cutting of Cupid's wings represent the sacrifice of the innocent. Okay. This is a common depiction of Saturn, which I always find very interesting. And that is, Saturn is, of course, the Roman version of the Greek god Kronos or Father Time. And Saturn is usually depicted as being pulled across the sky in a sun chariot drawn by dragons. Very interesting. Here's another depiction of this. Here, these are more serpent-looking, winged serpents pulling Saturnus across the sky in a sun chariot here with his sky. All this beautiful symbolic allegory. This is a interesting depiction of Saturn devouring the sun by Peter Paul Rubens. Unlike all grandmasters of classical art who were commissioned by the church, royalty, and nobility, Peter Paul Rubens was an initiated member of the mysteries, and this is very evident when you look at his pictures. But you just have to look at his accreditations to kind of get that as well. For example, he was knighted by both Philip IV of Spain and King Charles of England. So he was a very well-respected man, very high up in the society circles and the initiate circles. And this is his depiction of Saturn devouring his son. Yeah, a real charming subject, that. Okay, and we've dealt with Francisco de Goya previously as well. These are from his series known as the Black Paintings, which he built an entire house to display. I'm sure he had some very interesting rituals going on in there as well. This is a picture of Saturn devouring his son, and it is Francisco de Goya is regarded as the last of the great masters and the first of the moderns, so he kind of crosses over that border and boundary. And Goya was also the court painter to the Spanish crown and an initiate of occult circles, which is very obvious when you look at some of his other artwork. For example, this one here, which is the Witch's Sabbath, and you've got a nice goat-like figure going on. Okay, we've covered off time. Let's speak a little bit about purpose. As we spoke about earlier, ritual is that which is done at a specific place, at a specific time, for a specific purpose. So having dealt with time, we're going to deal with the purpose element things. The cremation of care, all right? For those of you who have a little bit of an understanding as to what is really going on in the world, this particular bundle of information should not be particularly new to you. You may have come across information to do with Bohemian Grove and the ritual that is famous for coming out of there known as the cremation of care. In fact, the word cremation of care has become such a buzzword, people don't really understand what it's all about and the levels in which this particular spell works. It's very pernicious. If you have a look on Wikipedia, it'll tell you that the cremation of care is an annual theatrical production written, produced, and performed by and for members of the Bohemian Club and staged at Bohemian Grove near Monterey, which is in Northern California. It's just north of San Francisco in the redwood forests there. And this whole thing takes place in front of a 200-foot stone owl, which is a representation of Moloch. Okay. And here's an artistic representation of that whole scene going on with the stone owl in the background. Obviously, here's a sacrificial altar. Now, what's interesting to notice about this is the Wikipedia version of this actually, lays it down in your face that rituals are a theatrical production. Look at that, folks. It's theater. That's what it is. We'll get a bit more into that. Ritual is theater. Theater is ritual. Now, I did speech and drama at school since I first started. 7 years of age, I think, was when I started doing extracurricular activity with speech and drama as one of the subjects I did. And I did it right through high school. In fact, even did performing arts at college level. And every year, the one thing you learn again and again and again when you start with the theory section of theatre, which is, of course, always covered off. You've got practical and theory. The theory section starts with theatre history. The first thing you learn in theatre history is that theatre is rooted in ritual. And they teach you this every freaking year. It is taught in mainstream media education. It is commonly known as a fact, okay? Even not just in esoteric circles, in mainstream circles. Theatre is rooted in ritual. That's a fact. Ritual is the root of most entertainment. And we've gone through this plenty in previous Dragonologies. Please go back and check this out. If you do not believe me, almost every pastime we value, hold dear, attend to, crave, engage in, All of it is rooted in ritual. And some examples of that being ball sport, TV, cinema, festivals, parties, carnivals, awards, competition, all that kind of thing, all rooted in ritual. Now, going back to this whole cremation of care story and what it's really all about, and that is mind control. The cremation of care is an ancient technology mastered by the ruling classes. This technology has been fine-tuned over thousands of years and passed down through ruling families. All mind control techniques and techniques experimented with and documented as being effective revolve around this original mind programming technology. An ancient cremation of care ritual is very simple. It works by exposing a person or a group of people to a ritual where the person or group understands that the ritual is immoral, unethical, illogical, cruel, unjust, irrational, and unnecessary. At the same time as this ritual is occurring, the rulers endorse the ritual as acceptable, plus offer celebration, reward, and other positive reinforcements to allow the immoral ritual to proceed without question or resistance. Once a human knows something is wrong, but sits through that event anyway, the process of watching immorality occur without taking action cremates the care center of that person's subconscious mind. Mind mapping shows that if a person stops caring about something important or something that is worthy of care, they lose the ability to care about most everything else, including themselves, their bodies, their children, their planet, their communities, their health. Most cremation of care rituals then and now involve murdering and torturing children whilst the parents watch. And of course, nothing cremates care faster than watching children suffer. The implications of ritual sacrifice. Let's have a look at this. Not only does the adult have their care cremated during such a black magic occult ritual, the child also cremates their own care just to make it through the trauma with part of their psyche intact. All parties, both people and those watching, and the victims, they all have their care cremated. Ritual cannibalism. Part of the ritualistic aspect of any sacrifice is the ritual ingestion and feasting on of meat or of the sacrifice, okay? And sometimes it's human sacrifice, and therefore they feast on the human sacrifice, which is cooked over a fire, as you can see here. Now, one of the interesting things to notice is that ingestion and feasting and eating is something that comes up again and again and again in ritual. Ritual feasting. A good example of this being the concept of the festive meal, which is rooted in sacrificial immolation, the cooking of the sacrifice. So the whole roasting or the cooking or putting on the fire, grilling, immolation referring to burnt offering, okay? And that is what this whole need to have a Christmas roast is really all about. It's what would technically be the sacrifice that is then subjected to heat as part of the ritual ceremony. The burnt offering, which is absolutely essential. The offering has to be burnt to be immolation, part of the immosala. So there's a huge amount of allegory that goes with this. And of course, what's interesting to notice is at these sort of ritual feasts, you find a lot of sort of interesting ritual bits, including cake, which we've previously covered off. Not just a cake, an iced cake, so the cake is covered or concealed, not just an iced cake, an iced and decorated, embellished or adorned cake. Look at all the lovely adornments on it. Red ribbon, nice and sacrificial that. Oh, and don't forget the red wine. Yeah, representative of blood. Very interesting indeed. Now, even the concept of mealtime, okay, so breakfast, lunch, and supper, even those are rooted in ritual. And this is where some people go, oh, not meal times, but you have to eat. How can you say that there's anything sinister about the need to eat? It's not that it's the need to eat, it's sinister. It's how we've been taught to eat that's sinister, okay? And the concept of meal times is rooted in ritual feasting. And the reason for this is because most meal times are related to specific times of day. For example, breakfast is in the morning, lunch is in the middle of the day, and supper is supposedly after the sun goes down or the last meal of the day. Now, at very distinctive times of day, and it's almost universally known as a fact that this is the way it is. So anything that's done at a specific time for a specific purpose at a specific place is a ritual. And these are very much done in that combination. Breakfast, lunch, and supper, all done at specific times for a specific purpose at a specific place. So they are rituals. And of course, you cannot escape with sacrifice. Eating, it comes up everywhere. The whole eating concept is inextricably linked with sacrifice. It turns up in a lot of words, which also are inextricably linked with this particular body of work. We've covered off wheat a lot in previous Dragonologies, meat as well, and we'll go and talk about that a bit more. Then, of course, immolation, Holocaust, burn, sacrifice, heat, okay, fire, a theme we come across a lot, threat, something we've dealt with previously as well, treat, as in trick or treat, treaty, as in a contract, theatre, as we've said, rituals of theatrical production, and feather, which is another one we've dealt with again tonight. And the word eat comes up in all of them. Let's have a look at meat. This is a bit of a sensitive one because there's a lot of people out there who really do enjoy their meat. And I'll be honest with you, I grew up in South Africa and barbecuing is a national pastime there. It's almost socially unacceptable to be a vegetarian. But the bottom line is that meat is simply not very good for you. The human body is not designed to ingest or digest meat. Simple fact. We do not have the right teeth to eat meat. Not at all. Look at some of the meat-eating animals and look how long their incisors are. Look how sharp their teeth are. We don't have anything like that. We actually have teeth that is more commonly associated with herbivores, which is grinding and crushing and biting through things like salad and stuff. The front ones are used for cutting, the back ones are used for crushing. We don't have the incisors for ripping like most people do. I beg your pardon, like most carnivores do. The incisors are in fact a symbol of the meat eater, being the carnivore. Now, our bodies, in order to digest meat, have to produce a lot of acid. Okay, meat comes in the protein of foreign meats, for example, cow, lamb, or any meat that's not, known to our bodies. They have very, very long chains of amino acids. Their proteins are made of extremely long chains of little individual building blocks called amino acids. And in order for our bodies to be able to absorb that protein, because we're not cows, our bodies are not made with the same protein as cows. What our body needs to do is to break that protein down into the individual protein building blocks, being the amino acids, and those are beneficial to our body. Okay, but in order to break that down, to break that protein strand down takes a tremendous amount of acid. Our body has to produce a toxifyingly high level of acid. We make ourselves sick with the amount of acid we have to produce in order to digest meat. And of course, that acid then moves through your entire system, your bowels, okay, your kidneys, everything gets affected. And it's a fact that 80% of bowel cancer is caused by the ingestion of meat and dairy. So I've always maintained that human beings left untampered with, were they never sort of put into the draconian construct, we would never have gotten into the habit of killing animals and eating them. It's not natural to us. Although we've been programmed to believe that it's the most natural thing on the earth to go down to the shops and buy a steak and throw it on the barbecue. All of this is an act of ritual, and it's not very good for us, not by any measure of means. A little bit of meat every now and then isn't going to kill you, but it's certainly not good. It's certainly not healthy for your diet at all. The human body, we talk about dairy as well. We talk here about 80% of bowel cancer is caused by the ingestion of meat and dairy. And much like meat, the human body does not digest dairy particularly well. Lactose is the problem. Human body does not digest lactose. And we are indoctrinated into believing and lies that milk and milk products are a good source of calcium, which is why we are fed lots of milk as children. And this is absolute bullshit because calcium does not absorb in the presence of protein. What is milk? Liquid protein. So calcium isn't going to go into the body in the presence of protein. So it's not really a good source of calcium if you can't absorb it, if it's not absorbable calcium. There are far better sources of calcium, for example, potatoes. But the interesting thing is that the milk protein, which doesn't allow for the absorption of the calcium, is called casein. It kind of holds onto the calcium in a way. But it's a very acidic protein as well. Same story, very long chains of amino acids, takes a lot of acid to break it down. Particularly cow milk, okay? It's not so bad for sheep and goat, but it's particularly bad for cow. And again, huge amounts of acids are formed in the body. And dairy, although going into your body is alkaline, because of the huge amounts of acids your body has to produce in order to break down the proteins into individual absorbable amino acid blocks, right? The huge amount of acid we produce toxifies the body, and therefore it's an acid-forming product, even though it goes into the body alkaline. And that's what it's all about. Is it alkaline forming or is it acid forming? Anything that's acid forming is toxifying to the body. Now, here's another thing that's extremely toxifying to the body, and it's something we keep coming up again and again and again, and that's wheat. Ritual wouldn't be ritual without wheat, so it seems. We come across wheat everywhere. Of all the grains, wheat and wheat products are the most acid forming. It's the protein inside wheat called gluten, which is also somewhat indigestible to human beings. And like all the other proteins, meat protein and dairy protein, it takes a hell of a lot of acid to break gluten down. And there's a lot of people that simply cannot break it down. They're gluten intolerant, or they're allergic to wheat. They cannot eat wheat products. And it's funny because more and more people are developing wheat intolerances because this food is toxic to the human body. Now, treats and sweets. Of course, we've got the word eat in treats, trick or treats. Sugar is very addictive and highly acid forming in the human body. In fact, sugar is far more addictive than smoking and alcohol combined. It's been proven. And is responsible for so many health issues. In fact, diabetes, liver disease, and obesity are all linked to the imbalance, the very high sugar diets that we sort of have. Sugar became very fashionable in the 1800s, particularly with the massive sugar colonies that were sort of planted by the various colonial powers. My hometown of Durban has massive tracts of land dedicated to Hewlett sugar plantations where sugar is grown. So I kind of understand that background very well, but the problem is that this really, this, what we think, what we've been taught to love, with such emotional joy to the point that it's, destructive programming. This thing is so damaging for us, okay? Sugar is so addictive and so acid forming, and it's probably worse for your body than dairy and protein, okay? So sugar needs to be cut out altogether. I was talking earlier about acid and alkaline forming foods, and my suggestion is that if anyone wants to know more about this, just go look it up on the internet and, Google it, acid alkaline food chart, and find out which foods are acid forming and which foods are alkaline forming. Simple fact is that cancer thrives in an acidic environment. I myself have brought my body back from acidosis cancer twice, from really too much barbecuing in summer, too much drinking, and my body just was like, no, and I got these really nasty acidic lumps which were cancerous, and I had to get rid of them by alkalizing my body. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to heal your body, is alkalizing it. but we are taught through programming, through ritual, to put toxins into our body, things we wouldn't normally naturally have chosen to put into our body, but it's been programmed in repeatedly through ritual to do this stuff to us, to self-sacrifice ourselves. And we are taught this bad programming and this indoctrination at school. And I'll give you an example of this. This is supposedly a healthy eating chart, okay? In school, we're taught this as the 5 food groups. In Holland, they call it die schrijf of faith, which basically is the same thing, 5 food groups. And if you have a look at this over here, it shows you, for example, fruit and vegetables takes up this much of the circle. The rest of the circle is taken up largely by foods that are acid forming. For example, here you got bread and pasta, okay, made from wheat, very acid forming. Dairy in this section here, acid forming. Sugary fatty foods, acid forming. Meat and eggs, acid forming, okay? None of them good for our bodies. Fruit and vegetables, raw fruit and vegetables, very alkalizing. You get the odd exception, of course. One of the things that was a real surprise to me was that peanuts are one of the most acid-forming of all nuts, so stay away from peanuts. But the Brazil nut is one of the most healing of all nuts. So just do a little bit of research, pull off a list on the internet, and change yourself to an alkaline diet. That is how you heal yourself. Health epidemics such as cancer is directly related to the amount of toxins, poisons, or acids in our body. And most of those toxins, poisons, and acids have been ritually induced into our body through programming designed for the purpose of self-sacrifice. And again, this is how the cremation of care works on us, okay? Cremation of care hurts us. We need to take a look at the whole obesity and health epidemic from a different perspective. We are killing ourselves because we don't care. As a result of ancient mind control technologies being used against us to this very day, we do not care what we are poisoning our bodies with. Clearly, we do not care that we are getting sick and by our own hands, through our own choices. And this is done purely through indoctrination, purely through manipulation tactics, advertising. These mind control tactics allow the few to rule the many. Yeah, it's easy to rule people when you can actually program them into killing themselves through the food they eat. Yeah, easy to rule people like that. Programming. The very fabric of our reality is interwoven with cremation of care rituals. When people don't care about anything or anybody, including themselves, they are more easily programmed into killing others and even themselves, much like these child soldiers over here. And this brings about the detachment from our humanity. It's easy to rule over people who don't care about anything, including themselves. These people can be made to do almost anything, including destroying themselves. These people are often the perfectly programmed soldier or child killer, and that's why these cremation of care rituals exist. And this is what it comes down to, folks: care. Those who do and those who don't. Or as my friend Brendan D. Murphy says, those who will and those who won't. Here's an example of trauma-based mind control that's worth touching on, and that is circumcision. Circumcision is an ancient ritual which is commonly used for the purposes of trauma-based mind control. There's a lot of people who say it's for the purposes of hygiene, but I, for one, myself, do not believe that. A traumatized mind which has been purposely injured by those charged with a child's care is proven to fracture a child's mind into compartments, which takes on different personalities. And one of the ways this can be done is by ritually mutilating sensitive parts of a child's body. For example, the penis, and this is even done to girls. Like I said, some people will argue that circumcision has hygiene benefits. Well, what is the benefit of this? Female circumcision is a common practice in religiously indoctrinated native African tribes. The act of abusing a child in any way damages them psychologically, and it shatters them. Abused children are perfect mind-controlled slaves. If any of you have not yet read this book, please do go ahead and get it, because this book completely changed my life. It was one of those, of all the books I've read, it was one of those that shocked me the most, and I cried many times when reading this. But Transformation of America by Cathy O'Brien is the detailed account of a CIA mind-controlled presidential model sex slave, and describes how trauma-based mind control techniques are used to create the perfectly undetectable mind-controlled military asset. And Cathy O'Brien was such a person. Trauma-based mind control is used to program many different types of people, including presidents, politicians, celebrities, public figures. In fact, almost anybody of perceived influence in the public eye is controlled or handled, we should say. The world of media and celebritydom is predicated on the complete control of humanity through the creation of icons who are either controllers or slaves. Now, this is very interesting because Hollywood is probably the biggest offender when it comes to occult influence. Even the word Hollywood gives reference to the occult influence that is basically the very foundation and fabric of the entertainment industry. And a good example of this is how the word Hollywood actually references a type of sacred wood that is used to make druids' magic wands. In fact, J.K. Rowling even mentions in her books about Harry Potter that Harry's wand was made from the wood of a holly tree because it is the most powerful. What's interesting to notice as well is who uses a wand? Okay, conductors. They use a wand, and they, conduct the orchestra with their wand, and the orchestra will move to the beat that the conductor conducts. Okay, he's the controller. He's controlling everyone else with the wand. Okay, and the word orchestra contains the dragon root word orc, which we've covered off before. Mind control through media. Humanity is being controlled and programmed through violent media, which traumatizes and desensitizes the brain, cremating care, and providing the psychological soil for the implanting of violence and destruction of ourselves and the world around us. We will never move forward as a race if the only E we seek is entertainment. We must have a balance by also seeking empowerment, enlightenment, and education. And of course, we need to stop being violent towards ourselves and others. That means stop eating the crap, stop putting poisons into our body, big pharma, toxins, vaccinations, sodas, hamburgers, meat, dairy, all these nasty things which are filled with hormones and GMO products, not good for us. All of this just damages us. It's all about self-sacrificing. In poisoning our bodies, we are in effect slowly but surely committing suicide. This is known as self-sacrifice, okay? Suicide or committing suicide is self-sacrifice. And sacrifice is sacrifice, whether you do it to yourself or whether it's done to you. It's a ritual act. And we are ritually killing ourselves. Now, not to be confused with self-immolation, okay? Because there are rituals in which people actually do things like set themselves on fire. Tibetan monks have been known to burn themselves in protest, particularly when China invaded Tibet. So this, self-immolation is very commonly known. It's a commonly known ritual. It's not like I'm making this up that, self-sacrifice. No, rituals of self-immolation are common in various cults and cultures, particularly end of world cults, okay? A lot of them are into self-sacrifice mode. Profiting from self-sacrifice. Whilst half the world's population lives in absolute poverty, and many more suffer from poisoning, those who perpetuate the suffering are profiting from our self-sacrifice. And the biggest offender of this, of course, being Big Pharma. The crimes of Big Pharma include suppression of cancer cures and the systematic poisoning of humanity through vaccinations. And of course, then there's the food poisoning. Our food supply is constantly being poisoned by over-processing, additives, and GMOs. Our food is making us sick which in turn then fuels the profits for Big Pharma. And of course, everybody knows about Monsanto and the Monsanto madness, the producers of Agent Orange and Roundup. And there's been a whole bunch of protests all over the world trying to get rid of Monsanto, who want to own all food that is grown. A very dangerous company, and most certainly do need to be gotten rid of. War is sacrifice. That's just the bottom line. Whether it's a war against our health, whether it's a war we conduct against each other as consumers, whether it's the war perpetuated by the armed forces, okay? War is sacrifice. But the continuation of war in terms of those that are done with bullets and bombs and helicopters and fighter planes, okay? That kind of war, well, one person every minute is killed by arms, okay? And without arms, there would be no war, okay? War exists for the purpose of profit. One of the most profitable industries in the world is arms. One person every minute is killed by arms. And the continuation of war ensures a sacrifice happens every single minute of the day, okay? And that's what these elitist bastards, these sick buggers who control us, okay? That is what they want, sacrifice. Because this dark, nasty fear vibration is what they feed off. And if they keep us in a state of sacrifice and suffering, oh, that's mealtime for them. So they make sure that one person every minute is being killed by their very lucrative arms trade. Yeah, nice people. The war industry. War is based around the arms trade and is by far one of the most profitable industries on our planet. In fact, let's have a look at this. Who sells arms? You know, the media has been playing off Russia recently as sort of a darling. Oh, Vladimir Putin. Oh, savior meme. Oh, vomit. All it is controlled opposition. Bottom line is war is war. If you perpetuate war, you're engaging in the mass murder and slaughter of people, largely innocent people, okay? Because let's face it, the people that America are fighting are actually funded by America. ISIS, who's supposed to be a big threat, is funded by America. So they're creating fights so that they can go play with their new missiles and their new fighter jets and, go play with their war toys. And, let's go fight with the neighbors so that we can chuck bombs at them and, see how our grenades work. It really is that stupid. So I don't care what people say, oh, Russia's the big enemy of America, but Russia's the good guy. No, Russia's not the good guy. They're responsible for 26% of the world's arms sales. That's only 4% less than America, who is the biggest exporter of arms on the planet. In fact, America doesn't export anything except arms. It is a war state. Anybody manufacturing and trading, exporting, selling arms, okay, is involved in the war industry. You are perpetuating suffering for the purposes of profit. That is a fact. Soldiers will either be killed or they must kill. They are either murderers or they self-sacrifice in the illusory name of freedom, liberty, and justice. There is no freedom or justice, so their cause is fake, or is it? Think of all the money that goes into fighting these wars. One of these fighter planes, we looked at them recently. One of the new fighter jets that the American military has purchased can buy every single family in America, every single person, a brand new home for like $500,000. So that's just one plane. How many homeless and hungry people are there? Yeah? So there's all the spending going into arming the nations, buying these fighter planes and jets and bombs and guns and all these things to go and shoot and kill people with in the name of defense. We're going to defend our freedom, and justice for all. This is a just cause. We got to go, nuke those buggers because it's just to do so, Absolute insanity, people. This kind of rhetoric is just utter brainwashing. So there is a purpose to all of this. It's not just random. There's always a purpose to everything, okay? And it's all about sacrifice. And that's what soldiers are doing. They are self-sacrificing in a mass ritual, which is that of war. All right? War is nothing more than a mass ritual. So let's have a look. A few just, let's throw it out there, what we can do. Steps towards a permanent fix. First thing, get rid of big pharma in favor of natural remedies. Stop manufacturing and selling arms and take all the money that we use to buy and sell and trade arms, okay, and use it to feed, care for, house the homeless, sick, hungering, and poor of the world, which that money would do many times over. Then, of course, we could secure the world's food supply with heirloom food forests, which can be done in a few years, not hard to do. Eradicate fiat currency, start bringing in local community currencies that are not based on debt. Clean out the illegal drug trade controlled by the CIA. And, of course, all of this will result in the eradication of poverty. And, of course, most importantly, deprogramming from the mind control. There is no real freedom until we first free our minds from the artificial constructs projected onto us that enslave us, okay, and that keep us subservient to a sacrificial system. So, of course, the most important thing we can do right now is to educate ourselves and each other, right? So education through media is very important. There's so much of this kind of material out there that we can learn from and that we can share with others. It's time that we start messing around, start looking at the solutions because they've been presented to us. We put these solutions across on our network. In our present time, education and media are inextricably linked to the deprogramming and awakening of humanity. So let's use our media wisely. Deprogramming is the effect of a course in Dragonology. So guys, please keep watching. And if you have missed anything, please go back and watch the previous episodes and please continue to support our network. CCN is in the process of fundraising for the broadcast license for 2016. So please contribute to our network support fund in order to help keep us on the air for 2016. We do have a GoFundMe campaign going, which is aimed at raising 60,000 euros to keep us on the air. We have also put out a full review recently of our expenditure. So we're completely honest and transparent with everybody as to where every penny goes. So if you can, please donate. And if you can't donate, please share the campaign or like our Facebook page and interact, get involved. But most importantly, share the archives because trust me, there's somebody out there who needs to learn this information. We only have 2 months left of 2015, so please help us to keep CCN on the air for 2016 by contributing to our campaign. I hate asking for money, guys, but it's the only way that we're going to keep this network on the air. It's entirely up to you. Please go to our website, consciousconsumernetwork.tv. All the details for the various things are on there. You can access our archives from there. You can access the funding campaigns. And, of course, you can become a monthly pledger and get unlimited access to the high-definition archives of CCN's back catalogue of works. And, of course, you can check out the broadcast guide to see all the different shows, when they're broadcasting and at what time and when. There's a lot of changes going on at the moment with the various time zones changing due to daylight saving. So please make sure you check out the broadcast guide so you don't miss anything. Of course, we do have the DVR function, pause and rewind, so you can rewind the live broadcasts or you can catch them in the archives. The high-definition archives, of course, are available still from Ethymarket. And, of course, that is it for episode 9. As always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. We will see you